F.H. Bradley, the English philosopher, under the guidance of the Oxford Don, Harold Joachim. Now, with Dr. Sinha in the audience, I feel like Elliot talking on F.H. Bradley with Harold Joachim in the chair. So there is a sense of excitement in my mind, if not apprehension, but excited, surely I am. Now, coming to the topic, we have to make certain preliminary observations. The first one is that in his essay, The Frontiers of Literary Criticism, Eliot says that to introduce a poet as a difficult poet is a slightly negative act, because as it is, the audience is half dead with the words like poetry and poet. And in addition to that, when you say that this poem or this poet is going to be difficult, it is really the end of it. So I will follow Eliot's advice and say that the general idea, Eliot is a difficult poet among the academics. Certainly there was that feeling when I was in active service that Eliot is a difficult poet. To such people I say, he is not a difficult poet, he is a different poet. He writes differently, and that's why he appears to be difficult. We can borrow a pennyworth of wisdom from our ELT friends when they say words are simple or difficult. Words are either known or unknown. Unknown words appear to us as difficult. In the same way, if somebody writes in a slightly different way, that poet appears to us a bit difficult. Once again, turning to our ELT friends, we are almost told day in and day out that language is a system of communication, and so is poetry. Now, for any communication, as you know, you require two centers. One is the transmission center, the other is the reception center. As long as both the centers work well, are in tune with each other, there is no problem. But if there is some issue with, especially the reception center, communication suffers. And so what I have to say in short is, when you start reading poetry, or if you are fresh to Eliot's poetry, the best way you can do, the easiest way, the most fruitful way to approach his poetry is to make a few adjustments to our reading habits and reading expectations also. For instance, when we read anything for that matter, not only poetry, anything for that matter, our mind goes from one line to another, first line, second line, third line, and every time there is a straightforward progression, what we can call narrative linearity. Now, in Eliot's poems, there is no such narrative linearity. Instead of it, there is what we call the circularity of a musical composition. As you will find in Alfred Prufrock, for instance, it's a very good illustrative example. If you simply recite the poem, Let's go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. You'll find the entire paragraph says only one thing: let us go. The paragraph doesn't even mention where to go. It simply says, let's go. Then in the next two lines, you get the idea where to go. In the room, the women come and go talking about migrants. Then the next paragraph is about the famous London fog, the yellow fog that rubbed his back. The fog is described as if it were some stealthy cat. Now, these paragraphs, meaning, are woven around one single idea. And then these various paragraphs are juxtaposed not always by the logic of reason, but by the logic of imagination or by psychological association. For instance, look at the first two or three paragraphs. Let us go, and then the winter fall. They have nothing in common, rationally speaking. But there is that association because Elliot Prufrock speaks of the evening as etherized patient and the London fog. The fog is also lying still, seeing that it was a soft October night and curled once about the house and fell asleep. So there and both the etherized patient, the evening, and the sleeping London fog, they match the state of mind of J. Alfred Prufrock that is paralyzed by self-consciousness. So you see this in Eliot's poetry, you see the logic of imagination at work. And that's why perhaps I find I.A. Resources phrase very helpful in approaching Eliot's poetry. In a short note on the poetry of the Westland, I.A. Research says that Eliot's poetry is the music of ideas. And that's exactly the description, meaning from J. Alfred Prufrock to four quartets, you find Eliot's poems are structured musically. Once we make that reading adjustment at the beginning, then we find that we are in tune with Eliot. We don't require a George Williamson to take us through his poems line by line. We are absolutely in tune, and the poetry, his poems make easy sense to us. Now, before we come to the topic, the importance of J. Alfred Prufrock, let us see, as I always like to do with my students, what the poem is about. That's where the first thing that we want to ask about any poem is, what's it about? Now, you get a very clear idea if you look at the title of the poem about the nature of this poem. It is a love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And it is a love song and a unique love song because who is the hero of the poem? The hero of the poem is somebody called J. Alfred Prufrock. Look at the very name also. The name sounds so unpromising or unheroic, very common. We are told that Eliot had seen the name Prufrock in his birthplace, St. Louis. There was a tailor's shop by the name Prufrock, and he got that name from there. Now, if you look at Prufrock, Prufrock is no Byronic hero, as might be expected, but he is what I call today morning only. I got this idea. He is somebody like Don Quixote or Quixotic. Is the best word to describe this man.
Yes, right. Anything is.
Yes, yes. Somebody was speaking.
Uh, yeah, I think that must have been by accident, sir.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I I thought somebody wanted. Okay, then. And this man is debating with himself an overwhelming question. What is that question? The question is also a very romantic one. He is in love with some lady of whom he thinks he is unworthy. Like a true courtly lover, he thinks he is unworthy of his lady love. And he wants to decide whether he should declare his passion to her or should not. It's a Hamlet like dilemma to declare or not to declare. In the end, he decides against it. And from what he says, it is very clear why he decides against it. No matter how intense his love is, there is always that fear. If after his declaration of love, what if she says no? This fear of rejection is really overwhelming. There's a story, if you want to hear, there's a story about Eliot and Virginia Woolf returning from a late night theater. In the taxi, Virginia Woolf asked Eliot, what was the thing that he feared most? And Eliot's answer was humiliation. The I don't want to hear no. No is such a wound to my ego. It hurts the ego. So maybe that it is that fear that makes him decide against the declaration. And there is one more feature that you should know. As you go through the poem, that will become very clear to you about the nature of this man. Eliot's own teacher, Alvin Babbitt, in his seminal book, Rousseau and Romanticism, has a very apt word to describe such people. Nympholepte. The word that he uses is nympholepsy. Nympholepsy is a state of mind where there is a combination of fascination and fear, meaning there is a fascination with somebody unattainable, and at the same time, paradoxically enough, there is the fear of the consummation of that desire. So that fear almost paralyzes them. And so when they go before their grail, so to speak, like Percival, they become speechless. They grow mute before their grail. Now, Babbitt calls this a nympholeptic state of mind. And in such a mind, the romantic and the religious go hand in hand. For instance, he gives the example of Dante. Dante is a religious nympholept. His yearning for Beatrice turns into religious longing. And Shelley is a secular nonphilosopher because to describe love he often borrows religious terminology. Prufrock belongs to that category, as you will find from the poem how easily he slides while he's talking something romantic, how easily he slides into the religious language. There are many passages like that. Uh, for instance, where he says, uh, do I have the strength to force the moment to its crisis after the tea, cakes, and ices? Do I have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet. Um, well, nearby, would it have been worthwhile to say, I am Lazarus, come back from the dead? Come back. So there is a very close alliance of the romance and the ritual in such a state of mind. And Gufak is like that. Now, when you take all this into account, you are ready now uh, to jump into the topic, the importance of that poem. And as I see the importance, it's in two directions. One is the personal development of Eliot as a poet, and secondly, from the viewpoint of the history of English poetry. From the personal development, uh, we have to answer what we have to go slightly back into his earlier poems. Most of us regard, and but rightly, that Prufrock being his first published poem, we tend to think this is his first poem that he ever wrote, which is not the case. Eliot has had written many poems before Prufrock as as a young boy. In the early days, that is, in the early decades of the 20th century, this information was not available. But in 1967, Mrs. Eliot brought out the first volume, Poems Written in Early Youth. And then later on in 1996, came out a used compendium of his juvenilia. There you get an idea of what kind of poetry Eliot wrote before he came to write Prufrock. And the question that we have to answer is, how is it that that person who wrote like that, the boy who wrote such romantic lines modeled on Shelley Keats' culture, how is it that he came to write an unpoetic poem like Prufrock, where he talks of evening as an etherized patient and all that? There's no time for me to go to the other. Now they are published, of course, Inventions of the March Hare and other poems, similarly the poems of early youth. But I'll cite for your information just a passage. From that you can get the idea what kind of adolescent poetry Eliot wrote. Just a passage. In one of his poems called Song, addressed to his beloved, the young boy says, the flowers that I gave thee were soon withered upon the vine. Oh, the wild bee flew to suck the eglantine. So let us haste to pluck anew, nor mourn to see them pine. And though our days of love be few, yet let them be divine. And look at the line, the words, flowers, days of love, eglantine, they remind you very much of Shelley Keats' culture. And though he says, though our days of love be few, yet let them be divine. Dr. Sina and I used to say his days of love were certainly few and not to divine. So now we have to answer the question: how is it such a boy came to write? Let's go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out again the sky like a patient. Now, for that, you have to turn to an event which Eliot himself has called the turning point of his life. And that is in 1908, Eliot got to know a book by the name The Symbolist Movement in Literature by Arthur Simmons. And that book introduced him to French poets like Baudelaire, Rimbaud, Mallarmé, Corbière, and especially to Lafont. From Lafont, Eliot learned a number of trade secrets. One of them, the most useful one, is of course from Lafont, he learned to dramatize his utterance, or to use the terminology of his later essay, The Three Voices of Poetry. From the first voice, Eliot now turns to the second voice. Instead of speaking the lyrical first voice, now Eliot learns to speak through an imaginary or historical or mythological character. Now you will find such a strategy is very useful, especially if someone of you is writing poems. He or she does wield a pen and tortures the muse, the poetic muse. What you will find this strategy of dramatizing one's letter, speaking through a character, is very helpful and also, I can say, very safe. Suppose you write a love poem addressed to a beautiful girl in your class. My love is like a red, red rose, I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. And you show it to her, I know what the result will be. You will be slapped at. And she will say, how dare you, and all that will go on. But when you read Lafont, and then you say, you write in a different way, dramatizing the occurrence, and show the poem to her. And once again, as her hand goes to her sandals and she tries to hit you, you can hold her hand in midair and you say, this is not what I am saying. This is what Prufrock says. You can express your own feelings but escape the responsibility of the expression. That is one very good advantage for all the tyros in poetry. A very safe strategy can follow. Second one is the ironic attitude towards the protagonist. The, the persona that you choose and the persona that speaks in the poem. Well, the poet has an ironic, detached attitude to him. And sometimes he seems to make some mistake, some fun of the protagonist also. So there is the mixture of levity and seriousness, which Eliot had learned from the metaphysical strength that in him. I'm sorry, very sorry. The metaphysicals like marvel and gun, not open that, and that's a mistake. Now, this is the technique, dramatizing one's utterance. This is the technique, speaking through a character. This is what he starts using from the love song of Alfred Prufrock. And you find its highest, most sophisticated expression or use in the Westland. When we do the Westland, you will find how there were many voices. In fact, the Westland was entitled first. He do the police in different voices. So you find the highest point of this technique in the Westland. Now, for the here from the point of view of the history of English poetry, what we get is this is what we can call the first modern poem. That is, if you look at love poems before J.F. Prufrock, you don't find any such example where the hero is such a laughable character, so negative, so much paralyzed by self-consciousness. So this is almost a paradigm shift in English poetry from Georgians to modernism. It's a very conscious attempt, as you will find. J.F. Prufrock is a very conscious attempt at showing people you have to express new sensibility, and in order to express the new sensibility, you have to make it new, to use the words of Isabel. Make it new, he exhorted the young poets. This is what Eliot had done all by himself. And that is why perhaps when Aesop came to know Eliot, he was so happy. Here is a poet, he says, who has trained himself entirely, all on his own. He is ready. He is the justification of modernist writing. This is how Eliot was praised by his guru, Ezra Pound. So that's the importance that I find in geography from a personal viewpoint and also from the historical point of view. And that's why perhaps because it is so modern, it is so expressive. I think even 100 years after its publication, the poem sounds so fresh. It doesn't sound dated. The poem was written in 1917, and now we are in 2022, 23. Still, the poem reads like as if it is written in our own idiom. The same thing holds good about Wasteland also. It seems to be our poem. Even the new generation feels this is my poem. And that is where I think the success of the poem lies. So that would be about all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madge. Uh, Indeed, you know, Prufrock even today is our poem, as you rightly said. Wasteland is so much our own poem, and I think you won't refuse to our invitation to speak on the wasteland also, if possible, in the very next session itself.
I can say no to Dr. Sinha.
Anyways, for this session, the house is now open for questions and discussion. Dr. Madge has indeed opened,
Yes.
horizons of
Oh, yes.
expectations, so to say, on Prufrock. Uh, Dear participants, your questions, your suggestions, queries are most welcome. You can either unmute and ask them personally, or you may drop your questions, observations in the chat box. Yes,
Far,
yes, sir.
uh, if I may, I
Please, please. We have Dr. Sanjay Mukherjee, Professor, Saurabh University, English Department. Welcome, sir.
Dr. Madge, I joined a few minutes late, but I think I was in time enough
Mm,
to listen to your very comprehensive, very interesting talk on Prufrock.
mm,
I I really enjoyed it. I've been teaching this poem for quite some time now,
mm,
I really liked your talk. I was just because the time was, for example, the way you connected with Jules Lafog and
mm,
and the metaphysical poets, Donne and Andrew Marvell, especially,
mm.
uh, and the turning point in his life that you mentioned. Uh,
Yes,
I was just thinking if what I do sometimes when the students first come across this poem, you would agree they find it a little difficult. This
yes,
is strange.
yes,
It's difficult,
yes,
and uh, then I ask them sometimes that, like you pointed out, that can we at least uh, underline or detect some of the important questions in the poem.
mm,
For example, the way the voice or the way Prufrock asks, "Do I dare?"
mm,
and goes on to ask, "Do I dare
mm,
disturb the universe?"
mm,
This is, I mean, from that question to a very banal question when it comes down to, "Do I dare eat a peach?"
mm,
in the poem.
mm.
So how does it, the trajectory of the very profound and the banal,
Yes,
how does it go on? Or
yes,
or a very simple question, how should I begin?
yes,
Like, and then I find the students start connecting with their own dilemmas, their own problems,
yes.
and the voice in the poem. It becomes slightly easier. They start connecting like
Mm,
that. So it's not a question. It is just an observation,
mm,
and the way that I liked your talk very much, sir. Thank you.
mm. Thank you very much. So, do I answer or?
Yes, sir. Please, please. Please go ahead, sir.
So one of the ways, uh, what I feel is, and it's an honest open arrow, I am forgiven for this statement. I think the earlier commentators have made a mess of his poems and made a mess because, I don't fault them. They were in a very strange situation. They didn't have much of information. Now, what has happened is, especially after 1971, when Mrs. Eliot took out the facsimile edition of the Wasteland, more and more information about Eliot's life is coming out. And so we can connect many dots now. And that's why explaining these poems has become much simpler. Nowadays, you see, sometime in 1990s, I remember teaching this poem, Jafar Prufrock, line by line, to school students. And they enjoyed the poem. Because I didn't bother them about paradox, imagery, or anything of the kind. I simply told him the story. Here is an old man in love with a lady and he wants to tell her. Should he tell her, should he not tell? That is all that the poem is about. And they enjoyed the poem like anything. So that is what we have to do, Dr. Sanjay Mukherjee. Depending upon gauging the student's level, we can simplify the poem as much as you. Actually, what has happened is even now, Mrs. Gordon has referred to a paragraph or a big portion of the proof log, uh, which Eliot dropped later on. And that section is called the Pervisulium of Prufrock, which is a passage of philosophical meditation, Prufrock trying to find out what is the ultimate meaning of life and all that. So that philosophical aspect of the poem, luckily, Eliot also did not take very seriously, I think, because he dropped it. Now what we get is the romantic aspect. It has remained a love song. So that is enough for us. We don't bother the students. The first thing is they must enjoy the poem. That is the first thing. Technicalities will come afterwards. You know, as we do in our sports, uh,
15 एक minute.
in table tennis, for instance, the first thing I tell my candidates is, do you enjoy the game? Service complications and strokes will come later on. Do you enjoy the game? The same thing here. Do you like this? Once you like it, then you can go through. Then you can introduce them to the technicalities of Eliot's poetry and scholarship details. That can be done. But since you asked me what is to be done with students, that's why I told you, of course.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, very much. Yeah.
Should I add that I was initiated into T.S. Eliot's poetry by Dr. Sanjay Mukherjee?
Oh,
And I can say that he really made us love Eliot's poems, and then he took us into the technicalities of it.
good.
I can very proudly say that. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Um,
you, Part. Thank you.
thank you, sir. We have Dr. Shweta who had raised her hand. Yes, ma'am. Please, Dr. Shweta Trivedi.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes. Please, ma'am.
Uh, Good evening, everyone. Sir,
Yes.
my question is that which is the best way to teach J. Alfred Prufrock poem in class?
That's what I told you just now. Depending upon the level of your class where you are teaching, you can get an idea how much the students are ready to take in and what are the things they. So you start from simple to complex.
Okay,
And luckily, you are helped by the word in the title, love song.
right, right.
Students will get interested. No matter how dull the love song is, they will get interested. And then you can tell, well, once you explain what the basic situation of the poem is,
Mm-hmm.
the whole situation is very funny. You can relate it to their life. Look at this, an old man in love with a lady, and he's such an insignificant, unheroic man. That's why I gave you some examples. Don Quixote in love with
Okay, okay. Thank
and,
you, sir.
and then and then I also talked about the structure of the poem, the musical structure of the poem. It's not from line to line. The unit of meaning in Eliot's poetry is the verse paragraph, not the individual line. So the paragraphs are musically structured and juxtaposed in the whole poem. The poetry emerges out of the juxtaposition, the music of ideas. Now you don't have to tell all this to students at first. If
Mhm.
if you do that, then you are done for. Then there is a wall between you and students.
Right. Okay, thank you, sir.
Uh, mm,
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
mm.
Do we have any other question? Yeah, Ishan Rawal. Yes, Ishan, please.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Ishan Rawal and I am from St. Xavier's College, Ahmedabad.
Mm,
So I have this question
mm,
that can we identify Prufrock poem
Mm.
as the British colonial implications, as in the external appearance of Prufrock being rich and modest, but inside or beneath that rich accoutrement, there was a persona which was really slackening, maybe a result of what was going on around the world with British Empire at the time. And how does it reflect in the poem that the effect were really insidious and Britishers were not able to come out of that rampant march they themselves created or were responsible for?
I'm not very much particularly happy with this sociological approach or historical approach. I rather go by what the text says. I'm slightly turned towards new criticism. That's mainly the thing, going by the text. Now, I don't know what British colonialism has to do with Prufrock. If you do, here is an American poet writing about an American character, that is J.R.R. Prufrock. Meaning, if you go strictly by social historical details, which to my mind are irrelevant.
So, so you suggest that we keep to the text itself,
Yes, that would be without bringing in the sociological aspects to that extent.
and
Whether it is colonial, whether it is pre-colonial, that is the meaning. That would be flying away from the text. That is the fashion these new days now. You leave the text and go into the Empyrean.
All right, sir. Thank you.
thank you, Ishan.
However, if we want to become fashionable, Madge sir,
Yeah.
uh, we can take it from the text itself and straight away go to from new criticism to deconstruction. The
Yeah.
other group of theorists who read lines very carefully, who do a very close reading of
Yes,
text,
yes, yes, yes.
and
Because,
we can say that when two-thirds down the poem we have a line, it is impossible to say just what I mean.
yes, yes,
This is Eliot anticipating
yes, Devila.
signifier and signified, or a chain of transcendental signifiers, and we can move into that
Yes,
with with appropriate level of students, of course, not with
yes,
everyone. This
yes,
was just a suggestion, sir.
yes. Yes, Dr. Sinha wanted to say
No,
something.
I think Vandana Ghosh raised
Yeah,
hand
doc,
last.
yeah, Bandana
Ladies,
ma'am, please, please.
Yeah, yes.
Bandana ma'am, are we audible to you?
can't remotely mute.
Uh,
She has to unmute herself.
sh-
Mm.
she's probably trying to unmute, but then some problem.
Mm.
While she is thinking, can I just raise a couple of topics on which Dr. Madge could dwell?
Mm.
Yes, sir, please, please.
I think you could talk a little about the use of myth in T.S. Eliot,
Mm.
which in many ways is central concern of modernism. Uh,
Yes,
don't forget about James Joyce. Don't forget about W.B. Yeats. And
yes,
then I thought perhaps when talking about uh, the dramatic element, you may like to compare Eliot with Robert Browning. In many
yes,
ways, the supreme dramatic poet
yes,
in the English language. And
yes.
then, since I have got the floor, I'll
Mm.
take some time, and then maybe you could talk a little about this poem versus Ezra Pound's Hughes have been Moberly. This is
Nobody.
a poem
Yes,
that not many people have read, but I
yes,
thought that was a brilliant poem
Yeah, yes,
More effective than Edmund Wallace original.
yes,
So it's a few possibilities depending on the time available. You
yes,
could talk about some of them.
yes. Yeah, when we want to talk about the myth, it's better to turn to the plays more and to major poems like the Westland
Yeah.
rather than Prufrock. In Westland, there is a clear use of the myth, and there Eliot also talks about the mythical method
Yes.
that Mr. Joyce and Yeats follow, and he also wants to follow. That he speaks of in his review of Ulysses. He mentions that now instead of the narrative method, we have the mythical method. So juxtaposing antiquity with contemporaneity, that's what he goes on saying. And then we come to Browning, Yes, there is, Browning is perhaps the most dramatic of the poets, yes. That is true. But there's one thing, in Browning, the characters are always fixed characters. They know what they are doing. And they are not disturbed by the possibility of other interpretations of experience. For instance, look at My Last Duchess. The Duke is not bothered that there can be other side to the Duchess that he doesn't take into account. It is only his side. Whereas in Prufrock, in a character like Prufrock, you find there is no fixed character. It's the character is very fluid as compared to that of the Duke or the other speakers of Browning. That's the only difference. But I think Eliot must have learned a lot from Browning, which he did not speak of. He should have spoken. That is true.
Eliot was very unwilling to acknowledge influences
Exactly,
and
exactly.
did that very reluctantly. For example,
Yes, yes.
with Bernard Shaw in his Murder in the Cathedral, clearly
Yes,
it is based on Shaw,
yes.
or even with Shakespeare. There
Mm,
are so many quotations of Shakespeare.
mm. And then one of the most significant omissions from Eliot's discussion is Hopkins.
Yes, yeah, oh yes, yes.
He doesn't speak a word about Hopkins. He just mentions him as a nature poet in After Strange Gods. That's the
Yeah.
only mention that we get.
Yeah.
And that is quite strange. Hopkins was really so much experimental.
So, if we say that good poets borrow and the better ones steal, in
Yes,
that sense, if Eliot was a better one, he stole.
yes. So did Shakespeare.
So did Shakespeare. and if, and then shall we say that probably Browning's characters were, so to say, less paralyzed by self-consciousness,
Yeah.
Yes,
probably.
that is what I meant. Yeah, that's true.
Yes. Do we have any other question?
I think Vandana Ghosh would perhaps type a question.
Yeah. So while she types, do we have anybody else?
Let's have something from the students. They haven't asked many questions.
We do have students from undergraduate and postgraduate level who have joined. Students, if you have something to ask. Sir, meanwhile, we would definitely like to know, Dr. Madge, how has your experience of teaching this poem been over the years to different generations of students? So how have they received this particular poem? Just be
Well,
quite interesting.
yes. One thing is, I of course enjoyed the poem, teaching the poem, and there is reason to believe that students did not actually suffer from my teaching. So, so they, over this, it has been good, and I've been teaching this poem ever since I was a student. I learned about this poem way back in 1967.
I see.
We had Eliot, some poems by him, and my friends found it very difficult. So they used to tell me to explain the poem to them in the class. So that is what I used to do, and they liked it.
Yeah, we have Dr. Siddhi Lonkar from MIT-ADT who says her students will be studying modernism this semester, and she finds the session to be a very useful introduction for her students.
Yeah.
Bandana ma'am probably is not connected well. I think there
Yeah.
are problems with the connection. Otherwise, because she's trying to unmute, but then she gets muted.
Yes. She could type if she.
Yeah. All right then. Do we then go to the concluding remarks? Okay, we have Tanvi. Good evening, sir. I would like to ask, why did Eliot keep
Yes,
um,
correct.
simple character as a protagonist? Tanvi is an undergrad student. Yes, sir.
No, he's not a simple character. Prufrock is not a simple character. He's much more complex. And he is an unheroic person. He doesn't have the qualities of a hero, the qualities that we generally associate with the heroes. In that sense, is simple, yes. Now that was the gambit that he wanted to do something new. You see, everybody sings about successful lovers. Nobody sings about those who tried and failed number of times. So here was opening up a new subject, what we call widening the semantic horizons of poetry, including new experiences into poetry. You can't only sing about those who succeeded. What about those who don't succeed? Do they not have any, let us say, chance of getting heard? So that's it. So Eliot was he deliberately, very consciously did something new because he wanted to do it. There's a famous statement uh, when Eliot reviewed in 1916, he reviewed an anthology of Georgian poetry, and there his statement is quite deadly. There he says, because we have never learned to criticize Wordsworth, Shelley, and Keats. Keats, Shelley, and Wordsworth punish us from their graves with the annual scourge of a Georgian anthology. Now, so you can see how Eliot was hell-bent and determined to effect a change, to radicalize poetic practice. That's why he did it.
True. Yes, if there are no further questions, do we go to the concluding remarks by Professor Sinha?
Any other questions?
Sir, I think you can go to your remarks, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Madhya, for a very enlightening talk. And I fully agree with what Dr. Sanjay Mukherjee said, that the talk was remarkably intelligent and clever and very enjoyable. Now, there are certain things which I'm glad you highlighted and which generally we don't always focus on. For example, the whole idea of the uh, uh, logic of imagination, or the whole idea of the poem as being like a musical composition. I mean, that is a point which teachers of Eliot don't always emphasize, or the whole idea of circularity of a musical composition. So I think these were points which certainly it was a pleasure to deal with. There are certain things which perhaps we could take up when Dr. Madge gives a talk on wasteland. By the way, our young friend Parth Joshi also is going to make a presentation on wasteland, so perhaps we'll have a very scintillating session on wasteland when we meet for the next meeting. One would be the impact of Walt Whitman. As Dr. Madhya agreed, Eliot is very unwilling to acknowledge his debt to people. And Walt Whitman is someone whom Eliot could not have liked. Here was a master of, shall I say, expansive poetry, totally unlike Eliot's old condensation. Walt Whitman was also remarkable for writing about failed people, about failed generals, about those who lost the war, about those who lost everything. So, in that sense, Walt Whitman, I think, is a remarkable influence on T. Eliot, someone who is in some ways unlike Eliot, and of course, the whole idea of free verse, which again connects Walt Whitman with T.S. Eliot, and then of course the allusions and references. I think that also, that of course will figure very prominently in a discussion of wasteland. And see, these days actually, to take a personal element, I'm working on uh, family reunion as a takeoff on Hamlet, and I can see how often Eliot has gone to Hamlet, how often Hamlet is important to T.S. Eliot in his poetry. And perhaps in the next talk, Dr. Matthew would like to expound more on Dante. We had long discussions on two matters on which we disagreed. I always thought W.B. Yeats was a greater poet than T.S. Eliot. We disagreed. Secondly, I always thought that Shakespeare is far superior to Dante. There also I disagreed because he feels like Eliot that Dante is a better poet than Shakespeare. I think we had to agree to disagree on these two matters. Then you see, it's very wonderful, Dr. Eliot, Dr. Martin, not Dr. Eliot, but he is virtually Dr. Eliot. Raises questions about romance and rituals. See, because rituals, again, to me, it's of great concern right now because of the paper I have to submit on family reunion and Hamlet, and of course, going back earlier to Greek drama. And imagism is, of course, something that will figure prominently in a discussion of wasteland. And it's very important that you raised the question about ironic attitude towards the protagonist, because what the young lady said was slightly off. I mean, slightly different from what it should be. As Dr. Madhya rightly said, Eliot is not. I mean, sorry, Prufrock is not. Uh, is not a simple character. He is an unheroic character, and that is important. And I would like to end by mentioning Dr. Madhav has often compared himself to Prufrock. Hopefully, is wrong. With a wonderful session, and maybe we could spend about 5 minutes talking about the next session, what we have learned from today, and what how we can improve upon it. And I think this time we should not wait for too long. The next session should be soon enough so that the continuity is there. Perhaps we should not wait till the end of February. We normally meet once a month. I think we should meet maybe in the middle of April. Would that be feasible, Parth?
Yes, sir. We can. I mean, if it's feasible with the with our speaker, number one,
Yeah,
number two, with our participants,
yeah.
it's fine. We can we should I mean I think we should first ask Dr. Madge how was his experience talking to this bunch of people, and would he be ready for another session, and when probably.
Yeah, whenever you are coming.
Even tomorrow, if
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that.
uh, we have Nikul Gadvi from Tolani College, Adipur, Kutch University, who is a TY student.
Mm.
Says he has found this session extremely enlightening and helpful. Looking forward to attending more such sessions. Thank you, Nikul. We hope you will be in touch. Uh, so as far as Feb is concerned, 11th of Feb is a Saturday, second Saturday, and then 18th is the third Saturday. So
I think we should check with ELTIS and MASIS people,
yes,
because some of them have lectures on this day, on Saturdays. So, but 11th or the 18th, can we take a decision in 2 3 days time?
Yeah, no, no. 11th, 18th, anything is
Yeah,
okay with me. There would be.
yeah.
so sir, I think we can coordinate after this session. We can coordinate with the faculties from MIT, um,
Okay.
and then I mean we can reach up to 1 or 2 dates, and then uh, we can inform Dr. Matke in that case.
Yeah.
So shall we conclude then? If anybody else has anything to add, Devjani Sen Gupta. Thank you so much, Professor Matke. Hugely enlightening and inspirational. Very delightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, we have, uh, since this is the first meeting, the January meeting of the Literary Club, we also have another theme running parallelly this year, that is India in World Literature. So, people who are willing to present a paper that is relevant to this theme can also contact anyone from the committee members. So we have modernism that we initiated in 2022, and we had probably 14 good papers in 2022 based on modernism. Sir, I think 14 papers,
Could be true.
could be more than 14 even.
Yeah, Archana
Uh,
keeps the keeps the records.
yeah, she could tell us the she could tell us the exact number of papers.
I think we began the discussion on modernism in 2021. Before that, we were discussing 19th century literature.
Yes, yes. So maybe uh, near about 20 papers in that case.
Yeah. Yes.
And then this year, side by side, uh, we have the theme of India in world literature. So those of you who are willing to present papers can either write to us on the Literary Club email ID, or you can contact anyone from the committee member. We have Dr. Archana Bhagwat, and Dr. Varsha Ghate probably has joined by now. Dr. Shraddha Joshi is there. I'm there, and we have Dr. Jayashree and Dr. Siddhi. So please do write to us in case you are willing to speak on this particular theme or on any relevant theme based on modernism. Thank you, Professor Madge.
Okay. Thank you.
Indeed, a delightful session. Thank you so much for very promptly agreeing to speak. I can understand. You're not that tech savvy, so it must have been quite some effort uh, juggling with things. But still,
Yes.
you were so very um, so very ready to be with us. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Professor Sinha.
Oh, okay, sir.
Thank you, people from Pune and other parts of the country and from Gujarat. Thank you for joining. Do keep in touch. Thank you so much, all.
Thank,
Bye bye.
thank you, sir. Mm.